from UNESCO or UNICEF or the African Union or a civil society organization. We're all here to learn, we're all here to grow, we're all here to share, and we all bring something amazing to this space. So the knowledge that we share here is valuable. Everybody has something to share. So we want this to be an open space where we can all feel comfortable learning and growing together. So let me just go over a couple of quick things about this course, what brings us all here, and then I will turn it over for some welcoming remarks. So this is actually a couple of modules together. They'll be taking place from now until February and potentially beyond. So if you see the flyer on the right side, this has been shared with everybody via email. It's also available on our website, UNESCO's website. This is going to be a 3-week series right now of 6 virtual workshops on topics in gender-responsive education that were previously identified by ministries of education back in August and September. So some of you may have taken that learning survey that we took and told us which topics you're interested in learning about. We listen to you. We always listen to surveys and to your responses. It builds into our programs. And we've picked out the best, the most popular and related topics for initial 6 workshops. They'll be held on these dates, as previously mentioned, in Tuesdays and Thursdays in November and December, at the same time every session, the same Zoom link. Then we move to Module 2. Module 2 will take place over December and January, and it'll be a period for independent learning. We are going to invite you to take part in a learning task, a practical learning task. We'll speak more about that in Thursday's session this week. It's meant to be practical and applied. And Module 3 then will be a chance for you to present your learning task for peer and expert feedback when we come back from the short winter break in January and February of next year. At that point, we will then ask you to help co-design Module 4. Module 4 is going to be an ongoing community of practice where we have meetups and virtual meetings on a basis that is decided largely by you. You will be then guiding and leading this space. And if you take part in all 3 of these modules, you will receive a certificate of participation for having joined this course. And finally, a few important links. I'll be sharing these soon in the chat box. We have created a WhatsApp group for this community space. You're not required to join, of course, but we'd like for you to consider joining. It'll be a way for you to network and partner with others outside of this space and to get some real-time updates about Zoom links, maybe discussion topics, and it's going to be ongoing. It won't be turned off at the end of these 6 workshops. In fact, we hope that it gains strength over the course of 2024 and gains more members. We have a resource pack as well. This is a place where we will be uploading all of the slides from the sessions, as well as any knowledge resources that relate to the session topics. And the link will be shared with you. You can download, and you can also see the parking lot, the 3rd link here. The parking lot document is in that resource pack, where you can add your ongoing questions, your ideas, and your realizations as you go through this short course. And you can edit that document. I would like to now ask Dr. Quentin Woden, our director at UNESCO ICPA, to give a few words of welcome to the group. Dr. Quentin has joined us last year. He is our new director, and he comes with vast experience from the development sector, as well as about 15 years of experience with the World Bank. So Quentin, over to you.
Thanks, Marianne. Hi, everybody. I am actually at the FAWE conference, which is on girls' education in Nairobi. But I wanted to get out to welcome you to the course. This is a topic, I would call it gender equality in and through education, that matters a lot for you and for us. So I would like to mention 2 things. The first one is a brief explanation of the KICS Hub. Today we have quite a few people who know about the KICS Hub, but we also have people from the African Union Focal Points group. This is a group of focal points in ministries that is managed by the African Union CFA, which is a Center for Girls Education. And so I wanted to welcome you especially. So KICS stands for Knowledge and Innovation Exchange, as Marianne explained it. The basic goal is to help ministries use data, use evidence for education policy making and implementation. Marianne, you can go to the next slide. And we actually now are in what we call the phase 2 of KICS. The program has been going on for about 3 years, and we just got an extension of the program until 2027. There will be 4 key themes, and there were 6 before, so it's a bit more narrow. Improving teacher professional development, strengthening early childhood education, data system strengthening, and then achieving gender equality, equity, and inclusion. And this is obviously about the 4th theme, but it actually has implications for all of the other themes as well. Next slide. So for those of you who are not familiar with KICS, Africa 19, we cover 19 countries, and you have the list there, but essentially it's all of the Anglophone countries in Africa plus Mozambique, which is Lusophone. There is also what we call a KICS 21 consortium that covers the Francophone countries, as well as Angola and Cape Verde. And we do a lot of things together, but this is in English, and so we are targeting the countries which are part of KICS Africa 19, as well as the English-speaking focal points of the African Union CFA Center. Now, that's about KICS. I also wanted to tell you a few things about IGBA and what we are going to do in the coming year about gender and girls' education. And actually, we are going to do quite a bit. And this may also present some opportunities for you. So I wanted to mention those briefly. So first, we have expanded quite a bit research at IGBA with studies, discussion papers, briefs, and we are going to support 2 journals, including the Journal of Teaching and Learning in Africa, which is run by AFTRA. You can see on this slide that I've put in red something around what is the Africa Teachers Report. This is a report we'll do every year, starting in 2024. And we will do this together with the African Union. And for this report, that will be released on January 31st in Brussels with the European Union and the Belgian presidency of the European Union, we are going to focus on gender inequality in and through education. And actually, one thing I wanted to mention is that if you have interesting experiences in your countries, we would like to hear from you. In the COP, you can also send me an email. Marianne perhaps can send that to you at the end, my personal email at UNESCO, because we are actually right now writing that report. And so we would love to reflect some of the innovative work that you're doing in your country. So this is about research and knowledge, which is the first area of work of IGBA. The next slide is about policy dialogue. And what I wanted to mention to you is that there are a few opportunities coming up. Here you have a few of the partners we are working with, of course, KICS on the left, but the African Union as well. And I think I've seen Simon, who heads CFA in the group. They will have a high-level dialogue at the African Union Summit in February, and maybe some of what is discussed here can also be mentioned at that event. AFTRA, the African Federation of Teacher Regulatory Agencies, will have its annual conference in May, and we are also going to feature there the Africa Teachers Report and thus the issue of gender and girls' education. And we are collaborating with the Forum for African Women Educationalists. Actually, today, we are going to release a gender-responsive pedagogy e-learning course, and we will send to you that information as well in case you're interested in taking the course. We may make, based on feedback, a few changes still in the next month or 2, and then we'll really advertise it much more broadly. And this is in partnership with UNICEF, apart from FAWE. I wanted to mention that because we have the UNICEF team here present as well. We can just go to the next slide, which is about the question of capacity building. I mentioned what you see on the left, that gender responsive pedagogy course. It's in 2 parts. The first part is about teaching and learning, and the second part is about violence, gender-based violence, and a bit broader. I also wanted to let you know that we are going to put on IXBA's website a data portal where you might be able to do simulations for your country on the benefits of investing in girls and some of the programs that might make sense. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that we just got news last week that we may get funding for projects that will implement gender-responsive pedagogy and also strengthen teacher training institutions. The last slide that I have is a following one, and this is also something I wanted to mention to you. We launched at IGBA an interview series. We are doing interviews for different purposes. We did a number of them for World Teachers Day in October. We also did a number of them for the Africa Youth Day. We would love to have interviews with you or others who are working on issues of gender and girls' education, because when we will release the Africa Teachers Report with the African Union at the end of January, we hope to also have interesting stories. And interviews are a much more friendly way to share information versus a report, which might be heavy on statistics and other aspects. So this is it. I wanted to let you know about this initiative at IGBA. In case you're interested, we can collaborate. I want to thank the KICS team, Marianne, everybody at IGBA, but also the African Union IPED and then UNICEF SRO for working with us. And I hope that you have a great community of practice. I won't be able to stay today because I have to go back to the Fairway conference, but I wish you all the best, and we hope that this will be a great learning experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Quentin. Thank you for taking the time despite your busy schedule. I know that you have a lot going on right now. And I know Quentin feels very strongly about this topic of gender equality and inequity. So I think that he's going to be a great resource for this community space. I'm stressing the community space because we want to go far, far, far beyond these 6 initial workshops that we have organized with you in November and December. We are activating the space through these 6 workshops, but this topic in no way can be dealt with fully and thoroughly in 6 virtual workshops, and we fully understand that. But we want to connect people together, you, as well as both the participants who want to come to learn in this space and to share national good practices, but also people who have data to share, experts, partners to come together in one space to learn and share together. And there's so much happening in this topic right now. So the idea is to build up the community for ongoing learning that starts with these sessions, but then goes on in the future. Colleagues, I would like to then move on to the next portion of the agenda. I'd like to introduce our course facilitator, Mercy. Mercy is going to be taking us through the 6 workshops, actually, and beyond. So Mercy is an experienced gender and development trainer, lecturer, policy analyst, program manager, and researcher who is completing her PhD research at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. She studies an array of topics in gender equality and equity, touching on HIV/AIDS, school dropout rates, early unwanted pregnancies and marriage, gender-based violence among adolescent girls and young women. I'll let her elaborate a bit on what she'd like you to know about herself, but I want to warmly welcome Mercy to this space and to turn it over to you for the next portion of the agenda. So Mercy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. And I would like to greet everyone, UNESCO and partners and all our participants. So I'm not going to rehash what Marianne has already said, but all I can say just in addition to that is that I am here as the course facilitator, of course, but I believe in co-creating knowledge. So I'm on this platform. I believe that because of all the different portfolios that I could see from the surveys, that a lot of us are doing this work on the ground around, some in the ministry, some in civil society. So the idea for the course, even though we have facilitators and we have guidance, is to bring to be able to speak about our experiences, to talk, to ask each other questions of what has worked, what hasn't worked. And of course, we're going to start with definitions and concepts, but the whole idea really is that we want to co-create. So at the end of our course, we will have a community of practice. And for that community of practice to be reflective of what's happening in Sub-Saharan Africa, it will require each and every one of us to participate in the activities that we are going to have, to participate in breakout rooms when we have case studies and all of that. But before we go into that, I just want to touch on the broader course objectives for this training. Let me just find out from Mary Ann whether are we talking about the broader course objectives or are we going straight into session 1 at the moment? Did you cover that?
Mercy, I have not mentioned it, but you can perhaps touch on both. They're so interconnected anyways.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Marianne. So the broader course objectives, as you may have seen from the flyers that you received, is to create and connect and mobilize a community of practice and to enhance our understanding as participants of gender inequity in education in Sub-Saharan Africa. So we are hoping some of the outcomes that we have in mind, especially based on the surveys that you've been taking and the responses that you have been giving us, is that you walk away able to diagnose and address gender inequities and barriers in various education systems where you find yourselves in different countries, and also for participants to be able to identify policy and practice options, planning, mobilizing strategies, and to prioritize gender equity in education systems. So we are hoping that as we start this conversation, we are all going to be, motivated to be able to go back and prioritize and have a reason to prioritize gender equity in our education systems. And in order to do that, as we go through the training today, we are going to make sure that we familiarize you with some of the requirements that may have been emailed to you already, but some of the learning activities that you are going to take away and work on and then bring back to inform our community of practice. So I can say those are our broader course objectives and outcomes for the course. And then in terms of the first session today that we are starting with, we thought it was appropriate to start with contextualizing the regions that we are in Sub-Saharan Africa, So contextualizing the issues that we have in the education sector. And to do that, we are going to start with contextualizing gender equity, and gender equality, gender responsive, gender transformative education. So we know that at the start, this may sound like a lot of terms and words that we are throwing around, but we've put together, learning slides that have been informed by the responses that you've been giving us that we are going to be going through. So one thing that I would like to say from the start is that based on the surveys that were taken, by UNESCO and partners, and also some of them administered by myself, what we've noticed is that we have a broad range of participants. So we have people that are directors of, gender in ministry sometimes, and some people in civil society, but we also have people that have communicated to us that they may struggle with understanding the difference between gender, sex, and gender, which then influences the stereotypes and the experiences that boys and girls have, men and women have, both in and out of school settings. So because of that, we decided that we were going to start with actually just defining the concepts. So I'm saying that ahead of time, so that for some people who've done this a lot and who've attended a lot of trainings, please bear with us. We are a mixed group, so we just want to make sure that as we are learning, we bring everyone aboard. And in order to do that, we are going to start with the basics. So before we actually go into the training itself, I just want to say a word about, creating a safe and tolerant space while dealing with sensitive subjects. As you can see, the world is constantly changing. We used to do face-to-face training where we see each other, we greet each other, we laugh, and we are able to read each other's body languages. But now, because we are online, online has its own benefits and sometimes disadvantages. So we are going to be utilizing the chat box in to communicate our questions and to introduce ourselves as we go in. But before we do that, I just wanted to mention that when we deal with subjects like gender, gender inequality, gender equality, or
Hello, Mercy. Is anyone else having trouble hearing Mercy, or is it just me?
We've lost her.
We've lost her.
Oh, that's too bad. Hello, Mercy. We might have to turn off our videos, including myself, in case that is making the connection slow. But colleagues, if I could just ask everyone to take a quick group photo during this moment while we are waiting for Mercy to come back. We like to always get a group picture, so I'll stop sharing my screen. If you can turn on your cameras just for 10 seconds, we'll take a quick group picture. There we go. It's good to see everyone. Not as human as an in-person meeting, of course, but a little better than being on mute the whole time. Okay, so I'll take a couple of pictures because we have multiple screens of people. So maybe Sarah Bogosi, if you can turn on your camera for a moment. Yvonne, Simone, Agatha, Mabor, if it's possible for you. Lorato.
Marianne, mine is on. I think I have a challenge with Zoom. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so on the count of 3, and please keep your camera on until I say off. Okay, 1, 2. Wangani, are you going to join in?
My camera always defaults to something I really don't understand. So all the time I have to try and set it up. So does that work better? Yeah.
Yes,
so maybe just go with that.
Better.
Sure.
Perfect. Okay, 1, 2, 3. One more. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, everyone, you can switch your cameras off. Let me check if Mercy is back. Mercy, I think it might have been the cameras, so I'll turn off my camera too, if you'd like to turn off yours, if it helps with your connectivity. And please proceed. And just to let you know, we're already at 30 minutes past. Mercy, over to you.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Marianne. Yes, I think the cameras overloaded the system. So I just wanted to say that we are coming from different backgrounds and we are aware of that. We just need to be aware of that. And also some topics and some discussions may be triggering for some people. So we will always try, to make sure that we are reading. Someone will be constantly checking the chat box to make sure that we communicate whatever we are feeling and what is going on as we are sensitive to one another. Yeah, thank you, Marianne. You can proceed to the next slide. Yes. So we wanted to start off with this ice, breaker, which is going to need our participants to chip in. From where I am, I can't see, but I'm sure Marianne will be able to see if someone puts their hand up to engage with our icebreaker. So the first one is the infuriated mother of a South African schoolboy lodged a complaint with the president when her son was forced to wear a dress for the day as punishment for his shirt hanging out. And then we also have in the UK, there was a research which was carried out, and it showed that 4 out of 10 schoolgirls were ignorant about cooking, and they cannot even boil water. Those were the findings. So the research concluded that there is an alarming lack of domestic and social expertise in girls between 8 and 15. And these are real life stories that happened. So I would love to engage our participants to maybe tell us what issues of concern are in these statements. Why would an infuriated mother of a young man lodge a complaint with the president because her son has been forced to wear a dress? Hi, Marianne. Are you able to see if there are any hands up?
Mercy, I don't see any hands up yet. So everyone, if you'd like to weigh in, comment on why, on this first question. I see Simone from the African Union.
Okay, good morning and good afternoon, everyone from Ouagadougou.
Thank you,
Hope that you can
Marianne.
hear me clearly.
Yes.
Yes, I just raised my hand so that at least someone has to speak, and so that you know that we are following you. Otherwise, member states are here, they could say something. I'm just thank you very much for this opportunity already. And from that homework that you are giving to us, I'm seeing two concerns, and those concerns for me are related to the gender stereotyping. As we all know, a mom who is complaining because a boy wear a dress, and the dress is supposed in our society to be worn by a girl. So what is the issue for a boy wearing a dress? So this is the first gender stereotyping. And why is it the punishment is about wearing a dress by a boy? Why did they choose that type of punishment? The second issue is about the girls, the behavior behind the thought that a girls cannot even cook eggs at her age. Why the research is focusing on that one and not also focusing on a boy be able to do the same thing at the same age? Did the research also focus on this one? And why it should not only focus on girls not being able to cook an egg at this age? So for me, those are related on gender stereotyping. I will stop from now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simone. Thank you so much. I like what you said. I'm speaking so that someone can speak. Thank you so much. Yes, and I can see a lot of comments. I won't be able to read them out, but I'm seeing a lot of engagement in the. It's just popping up on my screen to show that people have views and are participating. So this icebreaker really is meant also just to set the tone, to get us thinking, especially about the different levels at which certain behaviors and policies show up, as Marianne rightly also points out, that the researchers here, why didn't they also research the girls? So we can move on. Thank you so much, everyone, for engaging. We can move on to the next slide. Yes. So some of our prepared responses here, we had also said a boy wearing a dress is considered the ultimate humiliation because he is being degraded by being made to be a girl. And on the other hand, if a girl were to be forced to wear trousers, this would probably be regarded as a promotion. So these are some of the things we can think about, and also, you know, comment in the chat box if we feel differently. And then on the second one, the research is based on the assumption that cooking is the role of girls, and it does not even query whether boys can boil an egg. And we can all see that. But throughout the 6 days that we are going to be engaging with one another, we are going to be going deeper and deeper into how do we come to know the things we know? How do we come to hold certain views? And when we get into, like, for example, positions of power and of influence, where we can influence policy, where we can influence, you know, learners when we are teachers, when we can influence our friends, even when we are the students ourselves, what then happens with, in terms of our beliefs that we have and our attitudes that we have about certain experiences. We can move on to the next slide. Thank you, Marianne. Yes, and the next one. Yes. So as I've already said, we are going to be talking about, you know, what influences the ideas, especially in particular about gender, and also how these end up showing up in policies and in experiences for different people. So one of the things to think about as we start our training, which is going to keep coming up from the start to the end, is, you know, I would love our participants to think about some of the dominant ideas that are here currently are influencing, you know, our world. How do some ideas gain currency and dominance and popularity, and then some don't? And what are the factors and ideas that lead some ideas to gain currency and some of them to not gain currency? These questions will be answered as we go through the different sessions. But for now, we can go to the next slide. We are going to start going into identifying sex and gender functions, especially for the benefit of some of our participants who were struggling to identify the differences. Yes, next slide. Yes. So we have this very simple, you know, object that we have, which has been used quite widely. It seems very simplified, but it is the starting point which can help everyone. For example, do participants think breastfeeding is a sex or a gender function?
It is a sex function.
Thank you. And then the cooking, can someone else take that?
Is a gender function.
Okay. And okay, and menstruating?
Sex function.
Function.
How about managing?
Gender.
Gender function.
How about growing a beard?
Sex function.
Gender. Because women also grow beards.
Okay.
I think it's about sex. It's a sex function.
Okay,
No,
now
even ladies grow beards.
okay, all right. I think Marian may now need to hire
It's
a
actually
medical.
a sex function. It's a sex
No,
function.
Brown beard is a sex, it is a actually function.
I think I've
Those
heard
who
the
grow a beard.
male
Both of
sounding
you
voice.
have been there. You need her?
Though
Okay,
it
I
is
think
meant
females.
to be for, though it is meant to be for boys or men, women also grow beards.
Okay,
That's
maybe
why we
Mercy, you
qualify it
can.
to be a gender.
They grow, that is a malfunction in women if they grow the beard.
Mercy, would you like to
Okay.
clarify? I think we've heard enough
Yeah.
responses.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that the participants were done speaking. Yes. Yeah, so I think we will go with the last answer from one of the participants who said, based on sexual differences, if women do grow beards, it's not because that is how the chromosomes work. It is a malfunction. So growing a beard is a sex function, not a gender function. So as well as the rest of them, I think it's also clear from the engagement we've had. We can move on. Thanks, Marianne. That what it is revealing is that some of the things are quite plain, but some of them we need to engage a little bit before we can come to an agreement. So going to the basics of our understandings, right? So sex is the biological difference between men and women. While men produce sperm to sire children, women become pregnant and can breastfeed, right? And then gender refers to the socially constructed differences between men and women, which tend to change over time and can vary within a given society, from one society to the next. So our gender identities determine how we are perceived and how we are expected to behave as men and women. There is a lot of scholarship. There is a lot of things we could say, but based on the time that we have for our training, we are not going to dwell a lot on this, except if we still have any misunderstandings or any confusion. So, Marian, if we could move to the next slide. I would still encourage our participants to keep putting their comments in the chat boxes. So even if we rush through the slides because of time, if you put your comments and your questions in the chat boxes, at the end of the day, we'll be able to come back to you with the answers, or at the beginning of the next session, we'll be able to come with the answers, or with short discussions that can help us. So gender refers to those characteristics of women and men that are socially constructed, right? But what's important is that it then combines powerfully with other determinants such as poverty, such as age, ethnicity, and other markers of exclusion to produce particular patterns of inequity and inequality or unfair differences. Yes, we can move on. Okay, I think we can skip this slide and go to the next one. Yes. So what I also would like us to think about is what an African theorist, Nigerian African theorist, Professor Odiowe speaks about, gender signifying the power relation between the masculine and the feminine. And according to the gender ideology, right, the masculine encompasses the female or takes priority in relation to the female and is entitled to expect subordination and submissiveness and self-abasement of the female. So when we then start translating these into the policies and into the barriers and the gaps and the experiences that people are having in education and elsewhere, this will our theories will begin to make sense. We can move on to the next slide. Yes. So the most important, I think, intervention that we get from Professor Odioe is that the gender ideology is not limited to biology. It is also social and appears in relations among men as among women and among nations. And according to her thinking, it functions as a pecking order, which is why colonies were females in relation to colonizing nations, and men slaves were females in relation to women in the master's household. So once we understand that gender is not just something you can treat in isolation and that it is not limited to biology, in our learning, we can then begin to have a deeper and nuanced understanding of some of the systemic barriers that keep coming up, even though we are trying to deal with them. So I feel like when we open up the conversation and we start going into case studies, there will be more time to look at how these influences and how some of these theories can explain some of the challenges that we are here trying to deal with, especially from a point of view of education. Thank you, Marianne. So there is also the issue of sex and gender roles. In order for us to understand further, right, that we have reproductive work and we have productive work. So from what we were saying in the first exercise that we did, it shows us that reproductive work is biologically determined, right? Like the giving birth, breastfeeding, and productive work is socially determined, meaning that the work that you do depends on the gender, right? The socially constructed gender identity that you may be given, which is why you would find, for example, in education, that for the longest time, you would find that maybe only men could be teachers or headmasters or principals or professors, or only men could be doctors and scientists. So that's what we mean by productive work. And later on, we are also going to, in our discussions, we'll also see how some of these beliefs then also affect what we call the gender pay gap, where sometimes you can do the same work but be paid differently according to how you are conceived. Yes, we can carry on. And then, yes, we can go to the next slide. So gender relations, right? So out of gender identities also comes gender relations, the way we relate to each other socially as men and women. And gender relations are dynamic. They also tend to change, right? From different historical dimensions, like where we were before in terms of systems, even of government, right? For example, gender relations used to be legally instituted, where a woman cannot open a bank account, but a man can. And now you will find that, and then that would go into how we relate with each other, even in relationships. Yes, we can carry on.
And Mercy, sorry to interrupt, but the time is going very quickly. My timer is going off now. So if you can start to move a bit quickly so that we can get to the rest. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm sure if someone is moderating the comments, they can also see whether we are getting engagement and whether people understand, and we can move on and then maybe make some more time, or actually make sure that we will also distribute the PowerPoints in terms of so people can understand. I'm also aware, even as I'm talking, that I keep referring to boys and men and women. And like I said right from the beginning, that this is an introductory course. So because of the time limits, there also isn't time to go into also the different like gender, the spectrums that exist. We can carry on to the next slide. Yes. So moving on to stereotypes, right? From the survey that we took, we know that a lot of people understand stereotypes. Some were a little bit difficult to define, but there's a general understanding that, you know, stereotypes are widely held, fixed, oversimplified image. This is an Oxford Dictionary definition of a person or a thing, or which is why we have stereotypes about women or what they can do, you know, like women tend to do care work, men tend to do managing work. So something conforming to a fixed or general pattern. So stereotypes in themselves may even be harmless, but it then what becomes harmful is when how they are used to limit what people can do. We can carry on, Marianne. Thank you. Which then brings us to the issue of gender stereotypes, right? Which are also socially constructed beliefs about boys and men, girls and women. Recently, I was reading where men were also saying, you know, they feel like they are all expected to have a six-pack, you know, to go to the gym, to do all that. And those are also like stereotypes. And men from all walks of life who consider themselves to be real men are also saying they do not fit into the stereotypes that are generated through different mediums. So some of the mediums that we thought we could speak about briefly in an exercise, right, are constructed through sayings, songs, proverbs, the media, religion, custom, culture, education, and drama. Thank you, Marianne. So yeah, we can carry on. I think we've already said that. Yes. So our next short exercise as well is to brainstorm and give examples very quickly how gender stereotypes are conveyed in our societies through like proverbs, idioms, sayings, songs, you know, in customs, in culture, but also in education. So if we can maybe if you can have one or two people speak about the stereotypes that they see in educational content or stereotypes that they see in popular songs or popular culture, because that will also speak to how these then get entrenched and come into different sectors, including education. From where I am, I can't see if anyone's hand is up.
There's a hand up. Rosette, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you very much. In education, such stereotypes are seen in the instructional materials. That is one, but also in the language used by the teachers. You may find that for some subjects, like science subjects, a teacher can just say, this is not for girls. This is not for the weak-hearted. And that alone puts, you know, it affects other categories of children. And you may find that their interest will stop somewhere. When it comes to instructional materials, there are pictures that we put in the instructional materials showing maybe a man building, a woman cooking or ironing. Those are already, it is already showing you that maybe this is not a field for girls and this is not a field for boys. So those stereotypes have an impact on the learning environment. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rosette, for that. Yes. Is there anyone else maybe who can speak to how stereotypes occur in popular culture? Because we are also thinking here about if the content in our education is like this, where do we think this influence comes from? Like, why would someone who's writing a textbook write it in that way? Where do these influences come from?
I think it comes from socialization. I think for me that is the starting point. How have we been socialized? You come from a community. When a boy is born, then they will say that is the hair, that is the head, and you go to church, they will tell you the man is the chief priest, is the head of the household. So all those things, it's like being boxed. And from that, those are the very people that are becoming teachers, but they're also the same people that are actually writing all these instructional materials. So they come with that aspect of this is for this category of people, or this is for, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Yes. So as I said, because of time constraints, we are unable to dwell on some of these things, but these are actually the building blocks and the most important learning structures that would actually help us so that we don't keep falling into the same pitfalls. Like, for example, the songs, how we write songs, the things that we see, you know, that come through the media that save to entrench the stereotypes, to normalize them so much that we don't realize how we think and we view, you know, certain people until it then shows up in how we create content and how we teach and how we treat one another. So another thing which I wanted to go into, but which I will no longer dwell on right now, I'll just summarize without going through the slides, is the issue of difference and inequality. And this matters if we go from this short discussion we've just had, and now try to think of difference. I got different answers on what people think difference is. So the difference that we are more interested in this particular workshop, right, is the difference of not only gender, but the difference of race, the difference of ethnicity, the difference that comes with age, the difference that comes with disability. While difference in terms of our physical appearance should not matter, right? But the fact that we use those differences to decide who gets what in terms of resources, in terms of opportunities, which then influence our life chances, right? Then that's why difference then matters, and that's how it then becomes interrelated with inequality. So I thought it's important to highlight that before we even go, because it will be a building structure for talking about gender responsive and gender transformative education. Because if we don't understand how difference occurs or how difference is manipulated or is mobilized to influence inequality in the world, we will continue to write policies that have gaps in them, and will continue to institute practices that keep others outside. So that is the general idea that we were trying to communicate in understanding difference and inequality. There will also be, we do have learning materials that we can send to those who will be interested. There will be a folder where all of the readings are available, even for discussion after we've left this session. So some of what we are also not going to have time to get into now is how systems of knowledge, right, of how to run our economies, right, how to run our politics, so the socioeconomics and the political and the cultural knowledges that we have, which show up in systems that we then call capitalism, in systems we call neoliberalism. All of them have an influence, and even colonialism, they have an influence on identity formation, and then those identities are also mobilized in our societies to decide who can live where, who can live in an affluent society, the suburb, and who cannot. And in terms of, and education is also one of the things, right, that we see that especially in Sub-Saharan Africa, it has been used. For example, in South Africa, where I'm speaking from, during apartheid, it was legalized that Black people, you know, people racialized as Black could only get Bantu education, which is an education which was designed to make someone only be in a position of servitude, where you serve people in higher positions. So I'm trying to make the connection for you to see that if you look also at the way, even though we have removed the legalization and the structures, right, because of our democratic dispensations, you will find that even identities, when we look at it not from a racial perspective, even from a gender perspective, we are still, without unconsciously or consciously, using the same thinking structures where if a girl child cannot go to school, we are literally saying you cannot be able to get a certain job, you cannot be able to work somewhere. So that sort of brings my discussion to difference and inequality to an end. And just to end off, I wanted to talk about, in my very last slide, I was going to talk about, to link my first slide where I said, we need to really think deeply about the ideas that become prevalent in society, right? So when we had colonialism, what was the prevalent idea? When we had apartheid, and even as we say, it's still ongoing in different ways, where did those ideas come from? For example, where does the idea that men and women are different, like Black and white are different, all of these things, they start off from a certain point of view. So the idea that has led us to some of these things that we are trying to undo now, right, where that an able-bodied, agentic, heroic individual is seen as a man, you know, with critical thinking. But then everyone else, whether it's women, it's children, it's indigenous nations, it's disabled people, we're characterized as irrational and as emotional. So as we go into our different sessions, as we try to speak about, you know, to learn more about inequality, about gender responsiveness, to that, we'll see that these ideas that have shaped the world, they continue to show up in different ways. So if we understand that, it can make it then easier, so that even if you go to a different sector, you will be able to see where there's unfairness, where there's inequality, because you have those building blocks. So yes, thank you very much. Engaging. I've come to the end of that first introductory session, which we tried to make very short and intensive.
Yes, Mercy, thank you so much. I think that's interesting and hopefully a strong foundation for people to begin thinking about these terms and these concepts, and we'll definitely be returning to it. I would like to now go to one of our two guest speakers for today, Ikuko Shimuzi. She is going to be going over elaborating from the UNICEF standpoint on sort of what we just heard about, but then taking it a step further. I'd like to introduce Ikoko as the Regional Education Specialist with the UNICEF West and Central Africa Regional Office based in Dakar. Ikoko is at this office. It supports 24 countries in the region, and she specializes in adolescent girls' education and has worked with UNICEF country offices since 2008 in multiple countries such as Burundi, Haiti, Guinea, Central African Republic, Tajikistan, and Myanmar. So a warm welcome to Ikoko, and please over to you for your slides.
Thank you for this opportunity. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, or habari. I think Swahili is the second language in this space, not French. Just to mention that that I also am accompanied by other UNICEF colleagues, Wongani, Regional Education Advisor for your region of East and Southern Africa, and Zamzam, our colleagues. And I'm presenting for Ellen Kron, my counterpart in the eastern part of Africa, who is now with Kaddan to launch the digitized the gender responsive pedagogy module. And I will cut my video in case that the connection becomes weak. Next, and I'm starting my stopwatch to make sure that I don't go over time. So I will briefly cover these things, the context in Sub-Saharan Africa when it comes to gender equality inequity, definitions very quickly because you will go through that again with Mercy. And the concept of intersectionalities, this is important for us. And so what? How does all of this influence the programming approach of UNICEF? So in our region of Western Central Africa, and not, I'm sorry, I didn't get the data for the Sub-Saharan Africa, but the situation is quite similar. It's a region where boys and girls have this chance to complete primary or secondary schools. And if you look at this graph, we can see that there are some countries where girls are performing better when it comes to primary level completion. However, in most countries, when it comes to lower secondary completion rate, this is the first part of the middle school, the first part of the secondary schools. The boys overperform girls. Less and less girls are completing secondary schools. What does this mean? This means that girls are facing more challenges than boys in continuing their education at post-primary levels. That is, either they drop out towards the end of primary during the secondary, or they do not transition from primary to secondary. Next. If you can think of these three boys and girls in your countries or on our continent, there's John, 13 years old. He's from urban areas. There's Miriam, a 13-year-old girl from urban areas. Then there's a Grace. She's a 13-year-old from rural families, and she has a disabilities. What is an equality-based approach to support their secondary school completion, and what is an equity-based approach to make sure that they all complete secondary school? Just 20 seconds, if you can reflect, and if you can open your microphone and shout, one, equality-based approach, equity-based approach. What would you do as a Ministry of Education? That would be great. I'll wait 10 seconds.
I see one hand up from Sarafino. Sarafino Tisa. Hello, Sarafino. Would you like to weigh in on these two questions?
Hello?
Yes, welcome.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, Sarafino, please.
Yes, my question, I was trying to comment on the previous presentation, only that my hand was not seen earlier.
Sarafino, apologies. We're actually going to be taking the questions after this. So we are wondering if you wanted to comment on these two questions on the slide. If
Okay,
not,
let
then we'll
someone
go to
go on.
someone else.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank
So thank you, Angela. She responded. Equity-based approach is to give them equal treatment, and give girls and that of disability targeted treatment. That is an equity-based approach. Thank you, Angela. So we'll be seeing this more in detail in the next slide. I'm not going to read out these definitions. This is from UNICEF publications, but just to emphasize that equality means that women and men, boys and girls' rights, responsibilities, and opportunities will not depend on whether they are born a girl or boy. And equity is about the fair and just treatment of both sexes that takes into account the different needs of men and women, cultural barriers, and discrimination of the specific groups. We talked about children with disabilities. Equality sets the ground rules for creating a fair playing field, but it needs equity to make sure that everyone can compete on that field. Next. And I think you've seen a similar drawing of describing how equality and equity are different. So let's go to the next. And I'd like to introduce the concept of intersectionalities, which I think you can
Hello, Ikuko. I seem to have lost you. Can anyone else hear her?
No, we've lost her.
We can hear
Okay,
you.
I'm sure she'll come back in a moment. This is always a reality with virtual learning. And if you can imagine how hard we find it, our students found it so much harder, and our teachers during the COVID era, when they even had that option, many of them had no options. So let's see if she's joining back. Ikoko, are you able to hear?
I think she dropped off, but I'm pinging her as we speak.
Okay, in the meantime, I'll tell everyone, if you have questions, please post them in the chat box. We will be having some Q&A today, but also because we are meeting on an ongoing basis, we'll be getting to Q's and A's as well, Thursday as well. So we'll be building on this. There's a parking lot link that I've shared in the chat box. We're encouraging you to post your questions there as well as in the chat box here, so we can continue to answer them over the next few days. Hello, Ikoko, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, we're just checking if the presenter from UNICEF can join back. It was getting interesting. We were talking about intersectionality and gender equality versus equity. If I can just maybe go back to this interesting chart on the previous slide.
Hi, Marian, am I back?
Yes, yes, we can hear you now. Over to you.
I'm
yes.
so sorry. I don't know what happened.
No
Yeah,
problem.
so I'm already on the next slide. Sorry, I was talking to myself. Yes, so this is from a WIDE, the World Inequality Database in Education, so you can visit on the website. This is from Ghana's upper secondary completion rate. Just to show you different markers of social exclusions that Miriam talked about, and to say that gender is not the only factor of exclusions. There are other factors. I wanted to particularly mention on our continent, the conflicts, the climate change, children living with HIV/AIDS, or children with disabilities. They are affected because these markers of social exclusion interplay a lot with the gender. Next slide. This is from Niger in West Africa, but you can see again how different markers of social exclusion separate girls and boys. Next slide. This is from the global statistics. And we can see that within the forest quintile and those living in rural locations that are always disadvantaged, girls are systematically more disadvantaged than boys. And it is because the various forms of inequality intersect and interplace with gender, we see unequitable education results, such as in the secondary school completions. Next. So what? I wanted to touch briefly upon UNICEF's programming approach and how we are driven by this concept of intersectionalities, and we're shaped by this this concept. Next. This is from one of our publications. We recognize at UNICEF that the barriers or the obstacles to completing education for girls exist in different layers and different spheres, and that they intersect with each other. So even if we're talking about education results, we cannot achieve results alone as an education stakeholders. We need to collaborate with other sectors. And this process, which recognizes various intersections of drivers of exclusion and inequality, is for us an equity-driven approach. Next. Therefore, we take a multi-sectoral approach or cross-sectoral approach, in particular with these programming areas that affect girls' rights and well-being. So what you see in the diagram here are programmatic areas of UNICEF. So we have education program, but we also have child protection program. We also have water, sanitation, and hygiene program, social protections, and health and nutrition. Gender equitable education system can contribute to the results that go beyond education, that touches upon all of these programming areas. And one example is the child marriage or early pregnancy. We know that it correlates positively with education. And I want to add that we as UNICEF, which is a child rights organization, we prioritize the more marginalized, hard to reach girls and boys to address their rights holistically. And for the more marginalized population, it matters more that we address the deprivation of rights holistically, not just the education rights. Next. This is my last slide, and my stopwatch is telling me that it's time. Next. No, sorry, this one is good. Yeah, this one is good. So this is to show our organizational priorities stemming from actually Transforming Education Summit in September 2022. And we want to move from commitment to actions, and you can see that our second commitment is multi-sectoralities with other sectors and partnerships to provide comprehensive support for both boys and girls learning. What does this mean in your country, in your work? Which ministries do you think you need to be reinforcing partnerships more? And let me end my presentation with this question. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ikuko. And I believe you have to leave shortly. So if I could make a suggestion that if you have a minute to stay back here now, maybe if there are any questions from the participants that might be directed towards you or to UNICEF, maybe we could take those right now. Is that all right with you?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. I know that the time has changed a bit. So everyone, does anyone have a question for Ikoko or for UNICEF today, based on what you've just heard? And of course, we will be sharing the slides later so you can ponder over them more. And if you have a question later on today or tomorrow, we could pose it to our UNICEF colleagues from the parking lot. But if anyone has a question right now before Ikoko has to go, I think I see one hand up. Sarafino, is your question about this presentation from UNICEF or from the previous one, from Mercy?
From this one.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, I have two short questions. One question is, how do you define intersectionalism? Intersectionalism, that is one. Two, how does this intersectionalism affect education programming in order to provide equitable access in education? Are you getting me?
Yes.
Hello? Have
Should
you got
I-
me?
Sarafino.
Have you got my question? Huh? Okay, let me repeat again. I'm repeating my question again.
I received your question.
Have
Shall I
you
respond
got my
one by
question?
one or ask for a few other
Yes,
questions?
Sarafino, we heard your two questions. I do see one more hand up, but because you asked two questions at once, maybe we'll go to your two, because if we ask another person, it might become a lot to remember. So would you like to answer these questions first, Ikoko, and then we'll maybe call on one more person?
Yep. Sarafino, I thank you for your question. Intersectionalism. This is just one way of putting the cross-sectoralities or the multi-sectoralities or the multifacetedness of the issues that intertwines with each other and that we're trying to deal with. What we want to say is that education challenges and education success does not stand alone. It intersects with other challenges, other barriers, other markers of social exclusion. And therefore we have to wear an intersectional lens or intersectional approach or the multi-sectoral approach to address all of the barriers or the obstacles that are affecting girls to complete their schools and that are causing gender inequality and inequity in education sectors.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Sarafino and Ikoko.
And
I don't see any more hands.
Questions
Go ahead.
that I can address very quickly. Yes, Ismail, thanks for the questions. UNICEF has many multi-sectoral projects, or we call it programs, and best practices are difficult to be identified because we we can identify a good pilot programs, but it's really difficult to scale them up at the national level and in particular in areas affected by humanitarian crisis. And by the way, when I talk about national scale up, it depends on the government. It depends on the Ministry of Education in collaboration with other ministries to scale our best practices up across the country. So it really depends on you. But we do have many. One example is, for example, we work a lot with child protection programs to prevent and address school-related gender-based violence. And for this, usually the Ministry of Education collaborates with Ministry of Social Welfare or Ministry of Gender or Ministry of Social Protection, depending on the countries. And in many countries, there have been positive results, such as advocating to the parliamentarians to pass the laws that revisit the school code of conduct of teachers and even to pass the law related to sanctions of teachers who commit violence against the students. There are lots of evidence generation done. Another example is menstrual health and hygiene, which affect girls We did define that it's a sex-driven disparities. And we work with our water, sanitation, hygiene team to make sure that they are separate latrines, that the girls receive dignity kits, that they do not become absent from school every month. And these are some of the examples. The more and last example that I would share is the social protection, education collaborations, where we target the most marginalized families and provide cash transfer so that the families with the girls of the school age can prioritize their educations over other priorities. Thank you. And I will paste the website where you may be able to find more information around these.
Thank you, Ikuko. I think that'd be helpful because Ismail Ali's question seems to be about examples of countries. So perhaps if UNICEF has engaged, yes, and I think that speaks well to the KIC space that we're in, knowledge, innovation, exchange, that countries can learn a lot from other countries' examples. So if there's an example maybe of UNICEF maybe working with a country, a few countries on what you've just described, if you could maybe share that in the parking lot of questions and resources, we can connect countries to maybe that other country in this learning space.
Yeah, just to say to Ismail that there's no country where we do not encourage multi-sectoral programming approach. So you can assume that every country's offices on the continent, they have some kind of multi-sectoral, cross-sectoral projects.
Wonderful. Ikuko, we know that your time is so short. I want to warmly thank you for coming, for representing Ellen, your colleagues, and your UNICEF office and our UNICEF colleagues here today. This is wonderful. We hope that you feel welcomed to come back to the future sessions because this is a space about connecting partners together and not just having a couple of workshops. So I want to warmly thank you, and we'll share your slides with the participants.
Thank you, Asante Sana.
Asante Sana, thank you so much. Maybe we can go to the next presenter. We would like to have the African Union, specifically the Center for the Education of Girls and Women in Africa, join us. So Ms. Lorato Palesa Mondongo is going to be our next presenter. We have worked with her many times before. She's very good, I can say that. And she's passionate about gender issues. So Lorato, can you hear me? Can you go next, please?
Yes, Marianne, I can hear you very well. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Please go ahead. I forgot to say that you are the Gender Data and Research Officer at the AUCF. Over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Marianne, and good afternoon to you all, colleagues, wherever you are. It's such a pleasure to see some names that I have worked with here before. I'm Lorato, as it has been said, and I'm here on behalf of African Union CFA's Acting Coordinator, Mrs. Simone Yankee Watara, who is unfortunately engaged with the work of girls' education once again in the continent, as we know that it is very urgent and pertinent. So you may move on to the next slide, Marianne. And the next one again. And the next, you may stop here quickly. So the presentation is structured in the following way. We'll just give you a quick background of what AUCF does, because as Marianne said, this is to connect partners, development partners, activists, and experts working on the intersections of education and gender equality. So it's important for you to know the specific work that you do, and we will be very brief about it. And then we will share as resources some of the guiding policies and instruments that can actually anchor the work that you do. And lastly, we will have some interactive question and answer discussions and some recommendations. You may move forward, Marianne. Thank you. So the African Union CFA is basically a specialized institution of the African Union, which specifically deals with girls and women's education. So it's a very important institution in that it is for targeted ways of dealing with some of the challenges on some of the issues affecting girls' education in the continent. And we're located in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, and operating under the Department of Education, Science and Technology and Innovation of the African Union. You may move. Great. So African Union CFA has a strategic plan, and this strategic plan really is anchored or is guided by certain policies and instruments. And I have put some of these instruments as a resource, and I will share them in the WhatsApp group as well, so that you can learn a little bit more about them, because as it was mentioned when we started, that this space is really a co-curation of knowledge and sharing and for contribution. So one of the guiding policies and instruments is the African Union Agenda 2063. And we hear in Aspiration 6 an articulation that we want an Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential of African people, especially women and youth, and caring for children. And we know that education is one of the targeted ways in which the potential of African people can be realized. Secondly, our work is also guided by the Continental Strategy for Education in Africa, which is the CESA strategy. And it strives to really set up a qualitative system of education and training that will provide the African continent with efficient human resources that will assist us in achieving the vision and ambitions of the African Union, and consequently the African continent, as we know you're working in different parts of this continent. You may go ahead, Miriam. We also have the Gender Equality Strategy for the CESA strategy, which is guidance to mainstream and integrate gender dimensions and perspectives to the implementation of the CESA. So we know that the CESA exists, but we want a component that is deliberate about integrating and mainstreaming gender dimensions, so that even when we are talking about education in terms of accessibility, in terms of quality, we also remember the gender component in everything that we talk about, be it in evidence and data, be it in programming, be it in policy. So the Gender Equality Strategy for CESA specifically talks about that reflection. And then the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, SDG 4, which speaks to inclusive and equitable quality education to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. And obviously, when we're talking inclusivity, we're talking about leaving no one behind. And in Ikuku's presentation, where she was talking about intersectionality, at the core of intersectionality is that inclusivity, that you leave no one behind. So these are marginalized communities, right? And in this case, we're talking girls, we're talking women, we're talking children on the move, we're talking children living with disabilities, those who would need special attention whenever we are talking about access to education, because that's where the concept now of equity comes in, not just equality, but also equity, remembering the most left behind. You may go on, Marianne. Great. And then also still as the UN SDGs, we have SDG 5, which ambitions really talk about gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. And once again, empowerment of all women and girls. Education has been highlighted by different stakeholders. And we know, working on the intersections of education and gender equality, that is one of the targeted tools or strategic ways in which we can actually achieve equality. Because through education, we can see a fair and equitable participation of girls and women and other marginalized communities in the socio-cultural, political, and economic development of the continent. And then we also see the African Union Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa, which has been signed in 2004, and the 2003 Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa, which is colloquially referred to as the Maputo Protocol, which provides a legal framework for ensuring, as I mentioned, the political, economic, social, and cultural participation, and even environmental rights for all African women, and consequently, African girls, and education being underpinned in this. So it's important for me to share these guidelines or these policies and instruments, because for us to do our work, and by us here, I'm talking multi-sectoral stakeholders, right? Be the African Union CFR, be it UNESCO, IPA, UNICEF, IPAD, and you in your respective member states in schools, we know that to tackle these many obstacles, including some of the discriminatory social norms that were talked about, and even negative social and school environments and concerns around safety and access, we need to have some of these legal, some of these guiding policies and instruments that are on paper and we can use them as evidence to make reform for policy, but to also push the agenda forward for girls and women's education in the continent. You can move, Marianne. Great. So when I started, I said that the African Union CFR has a strategic plan which is implementing from 2021 to 2025. And this strategic plan has 4 strategic axes. And under each strategic axis, I'll just quickly share some of the ways in which we've been engaging with multi-sectoral stakeholders, just very quickly and just for your appreciation. So the first strategic axis is looking at gender responsive education frameworks, which is part of this workshop that we are doing, falls under that. And we engage ministers through the high-level dialogues where we talk about issues affecting girls in the continent, and then we try to align them with emerging issues, for example, climate change, migration, even the AFCFTA. We just find ways of integrating that to education, because there is pretty much everything that falls under education. And then we also hold meetings with education experts, and some of our focal points that are online here, we engage with them to push forward for gender responsive education frameworks. Secondly, our second axis looks at curriculum reform and teacher education, and UNESCO IGBA is one of the integral partners in that we want to push forward for curriculum reform, because it's one of the ways in which we see gender stereotypes being reinforced, being reproduced. And it's also one of the ways or the spaces in which we can do a lot of reform around gender issues in education. Third strategic axis is looking at the STEAM and skills development, and we do that through engaging young people in capacity building workshops, and we have had a number of those. And then lastly, education in emergencies and humanitarian contexts. As we know, there's been a number of issues, including the COVID-19 pandemic, which affected girls' education in particular. And we've been seeing the rise of conflicts in the continent, which unfortunately causes displacement, it causes disruptions of learning, and as Kuku shared, is learning. Jacqueline? Okay, Jacqueline, may you please mute your mic if that was by mistake, please?
She's mute.
And
you can proceed.
Great, thank you, Marianne. And through this, we have the Africa Educates Her campaign that we really are using as a targeted program to get girls back in school, but to also keep them in school, because we are seeing that there is issues with not only enrollment of girls in schools, but there's issues as well of completion. So you may find that in different member states, girls enroll in schools at primary level. But when you're looking at the evidence for secondary education, there are fewer girls completing at that level. So with this campaign, we just really want to highlight some of the emerging challenges and some of the ongoing challenges that are affecting girls. And it's important for us as key stakeholders working on education to have a basic understanding of some of this collective issues affecting girls' education so that we can have targeted solutions to those issues. Marianne, you may continue. And this is the campaign that I was talking about, the Africa Educator campaign that we would like for you to support, which basically is bringing awareness around the importance of not only bringing back girls to schools after the pandemic, but also ensuring that girls are in schools and the learning actually happens, quality learning. You may continue. Great. So we, as the African Union CFO, we did an exercise in which we wanted to map some of the issues that are emerging and has been sustained as affecting girls' education. And they were stratified into 4 key thematic areas. The first thematic area being the socio-cultural. And in this bracket, we are seeing that there are increased cases of sexual and gender-based violence, not just in schools, but also in families, in homes, in communities, right? We are seeing cases of forced and early marriages where children are married off at such a young age, and other harmful cultural practices, including female genital mutilation, which UNICEF shows that there is a direct linkage between harmful, the FGM and early marriages, where children undergo FGM so that they can be eligible for being married off early, which unfortunately there's also a correlation between that and early pregnancies that we see across the continent. And then we are seeing sexual violations on girls' and women's bodies in schools, in family setups, in the community as a whole, and other spaces where girls actually live. And then we are seeing unsafe schools and learning environments which come up because of different political and even economical and environmental issues. And lastly, we are seeing cases of school-related bullying and gender inequalities, and that we see lead to preference of educating boys over girls by either families or communities as a whole. Secondly, the second bracket is the economic and health bracket, where we are seeing poverty as an impediment to girls accessing education, where now parents are sort of forced into a corner to say, we have little economic mobility, we have little economic resources. What do we do with these resources? And families actually preferring to educate boys because they believe that the rate of return is maybe higher for boys when they go to school, unlike for girls, which then makes girls susceptible to things like child marriages in order for parents in poor households to try and retain some of those economic resources. We're also seeing digital gaps and digital illiteracy and lack of general resources and inaccessibility to information, particularly on career options like STEM, where even now we are seeing fewer girls and women get into the STEAM and STEM in particular areas of education. Poor menstrual hygiene and lack of wash facilities, we see that also as an ongoing and even emerging now issue that affects girls' education, right? And we are also seeing lack of representation by female teachers and poor teacher development, which UNESCO IGBA is doing such an amazing work around just galvanizing support on that. But we are also seeing poor learning resources and infrastructure, classrooms, books, transport, libraries, technology, where students don't have access to laptops, particularly when we're talking digitalization now, where students don't have transport because there's been migration, there's been internal displacements and other political issues, but we are also seeing lack of funding and investment to stem uptake by girls and women and education in general. And we are seeing that play out even at a high level, where ministries don't get enough funding and investment through scholarships to invest in girls. The third bracket there is the political and environment, where there's food insecurity and increased malnutrition stemming from no access to food, which is usually served in schools, because there's a correlation between school feeding programs and the ability to retain students in school. So that means if there's food insecurity and there's no food in schools, the chances of children having malnutrition and not being able to continue with learning is also high. And we are seeing in the continent where there's war and armed conflicts disrupting very significantly the access to education. We're also seeing displacements and forced migration and climate change and crisis and natural disasters. Recently, there was natural disasters in Mozambique, where there was the tornado, and we saw also the earthquake that happened in Morocco. So these are just some of the issues that are natural disasters that disrupt education, but we see that there's even more pronounced disruptions for marginalized communities, including girls. And we have seen with the advent of COVID-19 as a public health emergency, how it just disrupted girls' education. And then lastly, the psychological bracket, where there is loss of interest in learning and return to school upon disruptions, and just excessive trauma that students get caused by isolations and exposure to abuse, exposure to war, exposure to conflict. And we are seeing lack of psychosocial and psychological support for teachers and students, in particular, where there is no capacitation, and drugs and substance abuse, which has affected girls' education. You may continue, Marianne.
And could you wrap up in about 1 minute? I think you have some pictures to share too, if I'm not mistaken. A couple slides left.
Okay, great. Yes, here I just wanted to quickly talk about gender biases and inequalities and stereotypes that we see in education, in curriculum, in extracurricular activities, in subject choices, in enrollment and completion rates. You can move on to the next, which is just a short exercise really to our participants. So this is an example from a textbook, an existing textbook, where students are given this exercise to indicate the name of the institution, which is represented by the below personalities. And I think I can take maybe one person to just tell us what this particular example is saying to students as a language used in textbooks. Maybe just one participant. Martha, I can see your hand is up. You may go ahead, please.
Yeah, the example is showing that leadership is purely for men. Women and girls have no space. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you, Martha. It's as direct as that. A president, a minister, deputy is reserved for men. So though these are pictorial, but they send us strong messages to girls and education in particular, and how they can participate in the socio-economic and political development of the continent and their communities. You can move to the last one, Marianne. This is also a real life example from a textbook used by students. And can someone just briefly share with us how this would speak to a student? I'm not seeing any hand, but I would appreciate one, or you can type in the chat box.
There's a hand up from Rosette.
Aha, Rosette, you may go ahead, please.
Yeah, I see one of the pictures is the caring role. This is actually for the girls. And then when it comes to who is at school, it is the boy, the doctor is the man. So this is what is happening in our textbooks. Thank you.
Great. Great. Thank you very much, Rosette. It's exactly that. So we are seeing direct messaging and subliminal messaging that tells our girls in schools that you can aspire just for marriage and childbearing. And there's nothing wrong with aspiring for that, but it cannot be the only thing because it rests on gender stereotypes, which then perpetuate gender inequalities, where now we are seeing a boy aspiring to venture into medicine, to become a specialist, to contribute to the economic and socio-cultural and political development of his community. So these are just some of the ways in which we have to be cognizant of and very deliberate and aware of how we are using curriculum and textbook and language, and to just use that as a vehicle to normalize and sustain gender inequalities, gender stereotypes, gender biases in and through education. In the interest of time, Marianne, because you had said I should wrap up in just a minute, what I will do is there's some resources that are in the rest of the presentations that colleagues here can click on and read more, particularly policies and instruments and legal frameworks and what they say about educating girls in the continent and the gender component in education, right? And then I remain available in the WhatsApp group as well to share more information, but to also co-curate knowledge and get ideas from colleagues who are participating in this. So I think I will stop here, Marianne, in the interest of time, unless if I get to go ahead for you.
Sorry, Lorato, thank you so much. So rich, so excellent. Thank you. I know that there's more here on the slides, but we'll be sharing them with participants, and we hope that you feel welcome to join again in the next workshops. We'll have one on Thursday this week, next Tuesday, Thursday, the Tuesday, Thursday after that, and that you can explain, more, and you can maybe go into these terms too. But because of the time, I think we do have to wrap up. But I want to thank you. I think we have some questions coming in. I know we have some questions coming in. It's been so rich so far. I'm seeing the chat box. Mercy, would you like to pose the questions now to the, well, also you have some questions for yourself, I'm sure, as well, that you've been monitoring, but maybe to Lorato as well. Would you like to take it from here?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lorato. I was just saying in the chat box that it's such a wonderful and informative session, that part of the session that you just led us through. And I know we don't have time, but maybe we could ask just one person to, if is there anyone who would like to ask Lorato a question? We can allow one live to speak, and then the rest of them, we can respond to them in writing and post the answers. Is that okay, Marianne?
Yes, Mercy, that's fine. We'll have the parking lot for ongoing Q&A, and we'll share the answers with everyone today or tomorrow. Please proceed.
So, yeah, if there's anyone with a burning question for Laura, or just one, and then the other ones, she can attend to them or offline. I'm not seeing any hands, so does that mean we can move on? I know that
I see a hand up from Angela.
All right.
Thank you, Marianne. Yeah, just wanted to ask Lorato, is CFR doing anything about collecting education gender transformative indicators from ministries, not only ministries of education, but all ministries that are tracking gender issues?
May I go ahead and answer that, Marianne?
Absolutely, yes. Please.
Okay, great, thank you. We are partly doing that, where we've engaged education experts from different ministries, and we also have focal points from the ministries of education and gender in African Union member states, where they give us some of the indicators. And we have also done, although it's still at a draft level, it is not finalized yet, an out-of-school report where we are looking at specific indicators of girls who are out of schools and some of the policies in different African Union member states that speaks to reintegrating girls back into school. And then lastly, we have our compendium of legal, international and regional legal frameworks that governs girls' education in the continent. And it is available as a resource that I have shared with Marianne and will share with all of you. But as you are all aware, there is an issue of capacity, and particularly around data and evidencing, where there is inaccessibility of data, and in the data that is accessible, it's not reliable, and also sometimes simply we cannot access it, right? But it's some of the issues that we keep talking about when we are talking about girls' education with our partners like IPAD, like UNESCO, IGBA. So we are hoping that this is going to be a strengthened area of work, particularly next year, 2024, which is the African Union Year of Education. So we are hoping to do more work, and we are really open to getting partners, and stakeholders who would want maybe to strengthen this area of work, so we can talk more on ways in which we can strengthen this. And our acting coordinator of African Union, CFA, Messi Monianke, is also available online here, and we can continue the conversation outside of this. I hope that sufficiently answers you.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mercy, there's a few hands up. I see Martha's hand up. Sarafino.
Okay, yes, we had said we were taking one question live and the rest in writing. Okay, fine. May we have Sarafino go quickly, and then Martha, and then we'll attend to the rest of the questions offline, since we still have some more slides to go through. Thank you so much, Sarafino. Please go ahead.
Yes, okay. Are you getting me? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
First of all, I want to thank the presenter for elaborate presentation. And my question is, in how many countries in this region, in African Union country, your institution is strengthening gender responsive education?
Did you get that, Lorato?
You got my question?
Yes, thank you, Sen. Did you get that, Lorato?
Yes, I did. I got it.
Thank you.
So far, we are working with all African Union member states, by the way. So in terms of our youth capacity building, where we try to strengthen these gender responsive policies at ground level, we have impacted all the African Union member states. But in terms of our expert meeting, for example, education expert meeting, in which we engage ministries, and we had our Dakar Declaration, which I also will share. The signatories were from 33 member states of the African Union. And then our focal points thus far are from 36 countries, member states. So, but in terms of our footprint, we have pretty much worked with all the member states, and there's still opportunity to engage further and more.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lorato. I think this will also, your discussion at the moment will also come up later on during the week, where we will be looking at country-specific examples, and it would also be interesting to see from what you are saying, if you are working with all these African countries, right, the union members, whether this is actually also reflecting in the indicators. I know that in our survey, some people were also asking for indicators of gender responsiveness. So it's a good point that will also enable us to discuss further. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you very much, Messi. And thank you,
Yes.
colleagues.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
Ms. Mark, please quickly, and then we'll move on to our next presentation. Maybe if Ms. Lerato can also try to be as brief as possible, which she has done an excellent job of so far.
Thank you. My question goes to Ikuko. In relation to the Victoria definition of gender equality and gender equity. I was finding it very hard to understand the gender equality from that particular picture, because I understand equity is a process of getting to gender equality. So if we were aiming to get to equality and it is represented by that particular picture, to me, it is still showing some unfairness in the way the resources have been distributed to the needs of those three people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I think because of our time constraints, the slides, we were meant to go through the gender equity and inequality definitions and concepts before, but because of our timing, but thanks for bringing it up, because that's actually the next conversation we are going to have now, although it's going to be very shortened. We are also going to make sure that we give you some materials that you can take with that explain these concepts more, so that when we come back, we can engage also from a more informed position. Yes, I hope that helps, Miss Martha.
Yes, it does. Thank you
so much. Okay.
Can I just jump in a bit to add something on what you have just added? I have a very simple example here of distribution of, take for instance, giving wheelchairs or bicycles to persons with disabilities. Others may be young, others small. One thing that is in our mind is we are supporting this person with disabilities. But at times you find that the bicycle which is given to a young kid is very big. He can't ride with it well. So it is like the support we have given is not even of help. But if we look at their needs and then give them best their needs, as that issue of the picking of apples or mangoes, we don't give them just equally, but look at the needs. Which person needs more help? Is it the young girl or the elder person? So at least there you find that it gives you some knowledge of when you are giving the help. Don't just give on the basis of I'm supporting them, but not looking at their needs. That is generally my observation on those illustrations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes. Marianne, are you? We need to move on to
Mercy.
our...
It's been, sorry, Mercy, we won't have time to get to your other presentation, because we have only 2 hours with people, but maybe we could share the slide that people have been referring to, maybe the graphic about equality versus equity. I think that would be something that would drive the idea home, and then we'll do next steps. But we're going to start losing people, and because we've already lost some. It's been 2 hours now, but we could you could.
Oh, I'm not talking about presenting. I'm talking about those slides have the final, like the next steps, where we are going and the upcoming topics.
Okay, let me just open my screen.
Yes.
Yes, it's a few more down, but if you wanted to linger on this because someone mentioned it for just a moment.
Yes, thanks, Marianne. So I was just saying to our participants that it's just that we've run out of time, but we did think about this and we included it in our slides so you could see that equality is more about making sure everyone has access to the same resources, while equity is more about fairness. And as you can see from the picture there, that fairness would require someone who cannot benefit like from equality to also now maybe get more resources, thinking of the historical disadvantage. So this conversation was also going to lead us to what I'm saying. If I can just wrap up, maybe give a summary of what I'm seeing from the questions. People are not understanding what intersectionality is. So we were also going to talk about the fact that there are the differences we mentioned, like the differences of gender, of race, of class, of ethnicity, of age, you know, they intersect on different people. And then there are also intersecting systems, you know, that take away privilege or give privilege to people. That's where intersectionality would then come in. So what we can do is that tomorrow, before we can share these slides also, if people are interested to go and look at this before we engage tomorrow. So tomorrow we can give maybe just 5 minutes to making sure that we are all on the same page and people understand before we then start talking about the gender responsive and gender transformative policies as our plan is. Maybe Marianne, if we can go to the second of last slide on this, then I can tell our participants what's to come. Okay, so upcoming discussions. What does the one up before this one say? The slide before this one? Okay, yes. Okay, let's go to that one. To the next one, yes. So I think the people are now familiar with the times. So what I can focus on, so on Thursday, okay, let me just say it. On Thursday, we are going to meet at the same time, 3 to 5 p.m. East African time. And for those who are in Southern Africa, it's 2 to 5 p.m. And then we are going to focus on case studies that actually show interventions that have been carried out in different countries that are responsive and transformative. So we'll be able to also answer some of the questions we've been getting about what are the performance indicators that we are doing well or we are not. And then we are also going, another topic which a lot of people are also interested in, which came out in the surveys and in the comments, is the gender responsive education sector planning. So we also have that topic in, and we are going to also have speakers and representatives from different organizations that are going to lead us in those conversations. Is there another one, Marianne? Yes, yeah. So here what I had done, I was just giving like a sneak preview into what's coming. For example, some of the interventions that have been done in Malawi, in South Sudan, and in Zimbabwe, which clearly show that countries have undergone training sessions with gender responsive education sector planning. So we are going to talk about that. And okay, yes, yeah, I think that's what I can say about that. Let's see if there's another slide, or is that the last one? That should be the last one. Yes.
It's the last one.
Okay, so if that one is the last one, okay, I think what I should mention at this point is that we know that this is a lot to take in and not enough time, but we are hoping that at least if we will attend to your questions, some of them during the sessions, but most of them in writing so that you will be able to see and then maybe communicate if you have more questions. And then the upcoming sessions are going to allow our participants to speak more, especially those who come from countries where certain interventions are being done or have been done, so that they can share with us. And then in terms of Thursday, there's a folder that we are going to put up that has got the case studies and the guiding questions to learn from the case studies. So for those who might be able to spare maybe 30 minutes to an hour before coming to the session, if they want, they can quickly just go through the case studies and see if they can learn or if some of their questions will be answered. But if you don't have time, it's still okay. You'll come to the session and then we'll give you time in different groups where you'll be able to engage with the different case studies and also ask, you know, some experts that we are going to have or panelists. And but we also believe that even amongst our participants, you know, we do have a lot of people who are experts and who are already doing these interventions. So I think I'll end there unless if there's anything I've left out, Mary. I was just saying I'm handing over to you unless there's something I've missed.
No, Mercy, I think that you've done a great job. Thank you so much. I was just posting that in the chat box about your point about the homework. So, and I use the word homework very lightly because this is entirely a voluntary participatory group. It is a course, and we do want you to feel like you're going to be learning in this space, but all the activities are optional. If you want to earn the certificate at the end of the course, we will ask you to put in a little bit more, you know, come to all the sessions, complete the learning task over the winter holiday break from December to January. But what Mercy was mentioning was that we'll be sharing some assigned reading, some recommended reading for Thursday's session. There's going to be some case studies, you know, about, you know, some pages of case studies. We would highly encourage you to read through them or even to, you know, skim them so that you come for Thursday's session better prepared to talk about gender responsive and transformative policies and interventions. And you'll be able to analyze those questions together with groups. So Thursday is going to be highly interactive. You're going to be in breakaway sessions talking about the reading. So do your best. If you have an hour's time, give a look at the case studies that we'll be emailing you today. I think that's it, Mercy. That's all I wanted to just emphasize.
Yes.
And we have shared a link in the chat box for a survey. So if you look back at the message, let me send it one more time. We really want to know your thoughts, your feedback, your learning takeaways, what you're walking away with or logging out with right now. So if you have 3 minutes, just quickly tell us in that link. This is open to everybody, the facilitators too, anybody who's taken part today. Let us know if we can improve something. Let us know what you're learning, what you're walking away with. And if you have any lingering questions that you haven't posted yet in the chat box or in the parking lot that are coming to you that you want answered. And let us know. It's a short survey. It's kind of a fun survey, not too intensive. We're not asking you to commit to anything. It's just a matter of like, what are your thoughts right now? What are you leaving with? Mercy, anything else you want to say?
Thank you so much, Marianne. I think I just want to really thank our participants for taking part in this, you know. Tomorrow I'll try to integrate some of the data I was going to share with them, which shows that according to even to UNESCO, that our education on the continent is in crisis. So it's very, very encouraging to see our participants taking time, actually wanting to learn, wanting to share what they know, and for joining hands with everyone else who's trying to make, you know, lives better for girls, for children, for men, and for women all together. So we really, really appreciate our participants and everyone.
Absolutely. This is not a space for organizations to come in to pass out expertise or policies. This is a space for you to come and share and learn. And if you have a contact, an idea for a session, a program that you know about, that's working out well, that's bringing girls back to the classroom, that's advocating on the behalf of gender equality and equity, please let us know. We want to highlight these examples. So it's really going to be your space. This first session was a bit front-loaded and packed, but this is just the kickstart of the engine. And then Thursday, we'll hopefully have all of you back and we'll look at some case studies and we'll have breakaway sessions. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Mercy. Thank you, Lorato. Thank you, Ikoko and UNICEF. Thank you to everybody, all the participants. We hope to see you on Thursday. And Mercy, if you could stay back for a moment, we'll just see the participants out the door and debrief.
Thank you.
Okay, and the parking lot is there for your questions. We'll be answering them today and tomorrow.
I think I just want to